Hello fellow 3D enthusiast, my name is Ian, and today I wanted to share with you how you can do motion capture. And this is just some pretty basic two-dimensional motion capture. I've got this robotic arm here, and I just wanted it to match up with the exact arm movements of what was going on underneath it. Alright, so we've got an arm missing, we've got a tracking marker missing as well, as you can see here. Pretty obvious if you zoom in, but from back here, nobody will know, don't worry. So let's get into the actual motion capture part of this motion capture tutorial. One thing that will actually really help us is to track this guy here, because it's closer to the wrist where our hand control bone is going to be. And so I'm just going to go through and track that real quick. We did this one last time because it's easier to track, but it turns out if you set the motion model to be location, rotation, and scale, and also hit normalize real quick, if we put a tracker here, that'll track it just fine. If we hit E and track it forwards, let's lock our view to it with L and just comb through here, see how it did. That is looking beautiful. And then we can also track it backwards so that it is tracked throughout the whole footage. Let's just make sure it's getting through here. Yep, there we go. Cool. So this will really help us out in a minute here. And now is the point where we start translating what we're doing here into a 3D scene. So with the track that we just put in selected, and let's select one of the elbow joints here and the shoulder as well. I'm going to hit L to unlock our view. We can go up into reconstruction and link empty to track. And you can see we've got some new empties in our scene here. That's pretty cool. Let's actually go into our 3D viewport now and just take a look here. Okay, so we're probably going to want to reorient the camera at this point. So I'm going to go 1 to front view and go Control-Alt-0, and that'll just put the active camera to our view. I'm going to grab this guy and just move it up a little bit with G, and then rotate it downwards a bit on the X-axis. That way it kind of matches the camera angle that I used. And as you can see here, I've already put a robot arm in the scene, and I'll get to that in a second. But first, let's add in a background image for our camera. So with that selected, I'm going into the camera properties. Let's check background images, add image, switch that to a movie clip, and let's put in our marker movie clip. Now we can play through our footage and just see what we've got going on here. As you can see, our tracks are in here. We can scale those down a little bit so that they're a bit more visible. So I'm going to select the middle one and hit G, and just move it back ever so slightly so it's in the location where an elbow might actually be. And with this selected, I'm just going to hop into our object properties, and I'm just going to call it elbow. That'll be useful. And let's also name the shoulder and the hand while we're at it. Cool. So these are going to be our points of reference for our armature, which I shall explain now. If we go into pose mode with our armature selected, there's basically just 5 bones that are really the most important here. So we have this kind of control bone in the middle of the rig, and when we grab that, everything else moves. Then we've got these 2 green bones, and those both have constraints. I'll explain those in a second. We've also got a point up here that I've constrained the top bone to always point towards. And then down at the bottom, we've got the hand bone, and the lower arm bone here stretches to that hand bone at all times. And then you can see we've also got lots of finger bones. We aren't going to mess with those today. That'll all be hand animation that we do. And we've also got this kind of crazy looking thing on the back of the arm, which I'm also not going to really get into today. You can see in my armature properties, I've got those bones on a new layer. It's just a couple of control points. This one's parented to the hand, and this is an IK bone that goes back a few links. And this guy just rotates accordingly to whatever is going on with the other actually important bones. And if you want me to make a tutorial on how I did this, I could go into more depth about it, but today I'm just going to focus on these 5 bones here. We've got our 3 control points and the 2 bones in between them. So the way I actually went ahead and added these constraints is, if we just get rid of this constraint for a second, if we select the point that we want the top bone to track to, and then select that bone and go Control, Shift, and C, we can add a damped track, and it'll just follow that bone all around now. Same with this one down here. If I just exit the constraint real quick, you can select the hand bone, select this bone, and go Control, Shift, C, and let's switch this to a stretch to, And the only thing special about this constraint is I switched the volume variation from 1 to 0. That way it doesn't have that squishiness. It does have a little bit of squishiness, but it's not quite as wild as if this is at a full 1, as you can see here. It really starts squishing, and mechanical parts shouldn't really be doing that. So I set that to a 0. Now that's the rig pretty much explained. The model is something I just kit bashed together with a whole bunch of parts from one of Ian Hubert's kit bash packs that he's got on his Patreon. Once again, a really good investment. I know I say that so much, but it's been wonderful to see what he's up to and get all these really nice kit bash packs from him. But yeah, that's the rig side of this motion capture project. Let's actually go ahead now and conform this rig to our tracked and empties here. So I'm going to select the rig once again, go into pose mode, and I'm going to start with the shoulder bone. Let's just go into our bone constraints tab here and drop in a copy location constraint. Our target is going to be the shoulder, so let's type that in. There we go, it's stuck there. Let's also hit offset really quick, and you can see it just goes off into the wild yonder. From camera view, we can kind of grab that and move it closer to around where our shoulder is. And then let's just do that same thing to the elbow. So adding in a copy location constraint, elbow, and hit offset, and just roughly line that back up to where it should be. And we can do the same thing with the hand bone as well. Copy location, hand, there it is, offset, and reset the offset. Cool. So really quickly here, we've got our arm completely constrained to our tracks. And if we play through the animation here, you can see things are looking pretty dang good. Now if we look a little bit more closely, you can see the elbow isn't quite matching up with where the actual elbow is. So what we could do is we could enable auto keyframes and select our elbow control. And since we checked offset, we can grab this and adjust it manually if needed. So from camera view, I might just go ahead and do that. Just plop it where it should be at all times. Most of the time it doesn't stray very far from the actual point where it should be. But sometimes it just looks a little bit strange. And the only reason it does that is because the point that we actually tracked wasn't the exact elbow point. It was underneath the elbow ways, so it's trying to conform to that location instead of the location of the actual elbow. But just using some keyframes, we can kind of line it up and help it to look a little bit better. I'm just hitting G to add in keyframes here, with our auto keyframes enabled, of course. And I'd say that's probably good. Let's just play it back real quick, take a look. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty nice. Another thing we could do is rotate the hand manually. I know it seems like so often motion capture is just the solution to everything, but it turns out there can be a bit of manual adjustments that really need to happen when you're using motion capture. Of course, we could work on the fingers, probably make things look a little bit more lively. But since it's a robot arm, I think we can get away without doing that, at least for today. But yeah, just throwing in some of these manual keyframes I think helps it look a bit better. We might want to work on those a bit. But it does look very robotic, and it being a robot arm, I think that's not a terrible thing. Ooh, let's also take the shoulder bone without keyframes enabled, and I'm just going to kind of scrub through and make sure that's aligned where it should be. I think it might be a little bit too far off to the right, so I'm just going to line that in a little bit closer to the left side of it. So yeah, motion capture. So next week, I'm probably going to go into more about how you can actually integrate this into the footage. Right now, if we render it out, you can't see anything. I just wanted to get the motion capture bit out of the way. But hey, speaking of integrating CG things into footage, if you found this useful and you're interested in learning more about visual effects in Blender, I've created a completely free video for you, and in this video I go over 5 tips for integrating your CG creations into real-life footage. So if that sounds interesting to you, there's a link in the description. Definitely give it a click. But hey, I'd say we're done here. I hope you have an excellent day, and cheers!